You're welcome to the Feeding Africa podcast. I have the singular honor of hosting Dr. Yemi Akinbamijo. I just love his name. A true visionary in African agriculture, Dr. Yemi is the former executive director of the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, FARA, where he has been instrumental in shaping agricultural policies and practices across the continent. Before his role at FARA, Dr. Yemi served as the head of Agriculture and Food Security Division at the African Union Commission, leading continent-wide initiatives under the Comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program. With over 30 years in the field, his work spans critical areas like food security, rural development, sustainable agriculture, climate change. I could go on and on and on. He's not just an expert, but he is a thought leader with a PhD from the Wageningen. Please help me with the name.
Wageningen.
Wageningen. I need some German class. Agriculture University in the Netherlands and numerous publications in agricultural sciences. Before we came on air or we came live, he was telling me about his latest book, which we will explore later, maybe in another interview. But I have Dr. Akinbamijo. Welcome, Doc.
Thank you very much, Caroline. It's a great pleasure and honor for having me here.
I mean, it's really a good time because we've been trying hard to get you, and we are glad that we caught you at the right time.
Yep. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
You're welcome. So now, before we go into the whole agriculture talk, your entry into agriculture, was it an accident or was it intentional?
Thank you. I would say it's a serendipitous moment. It was a serendipitous moment,
okay,
because when I was finishing A levels, that was somewhere 1978. My interest was in modern European languages.
Wow.
Yeah. But my parents wanted me to do medicine. And so we were really turned between two.
Yeah.
I could go into either, but I was much more prepared for language arts. But then my father insisted, and then I applied to go in for veterinary medicine at the University of Ibadan.
Okay.
And as my first choice. And my second choice was for animal science in the University of Ife, which is now Obafemi Awolowo University. So at the end of the day, I was not admitted in University of Ibadan.
Oh.
So I went in for my second choice,
okay,
which was, rather than doing veterinary science, I then moved in to do animal science.
Okay.
But the attraction for me actually came from one vet doctor that I really admired as a secondary school boy. That was Dr. Adenaike. His wife was my biology teacher.
Okay.
And, so infatuated by him that I thought when I grow up, I would like to be a vet doctor.
So did you continue in that trajectory or it's changed?
Oh, well, I ended up as an animal scientist.
Okay.
So my first degree is BSc, Bachelor of Agriculture, with a specialization in animal sciences. Then I went on to do a master's and continued to PhD from the Wageningen Agricultural University, as it was called at the time.
Okay.
So my interests evolved over time, and I eventually now began to study the metabolism of ruminant animals under pathogenic conditions. In other words, what happened when animals are subjected to disease environment, and my interest was in trypanosomosis and fasciolasis. This a bit jaw-breaking.
Oh, I think I know about trypanosomiasis from school, in agric science.
It may tell you something about sleeping sickness.
Yeah.
But the other one is the liver fluke, which is also called fasciolasis.
Yeah.
So those were my two key subjects at the PhD and master's levels.
Yeah.
And these two diseases wreak havoc in Africa. So we lose anything between upwards of 3, 4, 5 billions worth of livestock
due to
these diseases.
Wow.
And especially trypanosomosis. I mean, it's just terrible.
Wow. I mean, this is enlightening because I remember when we were in school, whenever we discussed that subject, I mean, some of my colleagues used to make fun of it because when someone starts sleeping in class, it's like, sleeping sickness. Yeah. But I didn't know that it had such grave impact.
Yes. Well, people don't understand the connotation sleeping sickness.
Yeah.
To an ordinary man is just anybody who's
sleeping. Yeah.
But sleeping sickness is both in human. We have the human trypanosomosis, and there is the African animal trypanosomosis. And then there is also what is called the Nagana, which is more related to the type of disease in Latin America. So for us in Africa, the human trypanosomosis is still a big issue. WHO will tell you that. But not just in human trypanosomosis, but the OIE, that's the World Animal Health Organization based in Paris, will also tell you that trypanosomosis is still one of the biggest health constraints in animal production in Africa.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, well, this is, I think, another time we're going to deal more into all these animal sciences where Doctor began his journey. Yeah. Now, let's look at your experience in the AU and in FARA. Many times, or should I even say currently, Africa produces some amount of food and animal products, but it is not to,
It's peanuts.
Yes. Why is this so? And in your experience, what can you tell us about food security, food shortage, and all these things?
Okay, very good question. Let me start with the classical definition of food security. Because you ask people, what's food security? And the classical definition of food security was by one Professor Joachim von Braun, who is a very good friend of FARA, by the way, and a former Director General of the International Food Policy Research Institute in Washington. And many years back, he defined food security as access, affordability, and availability of food at all times to support meaningful livelihood. Okay? Is the access, the affordability, the availability.
At all times.
That's when you attain food security. So that's a classical definition of food security. Now, Africa is richly endowed. But for crying out loud, about 65% of the arable land on this planet is still in Africa.
65%?
82% of the fresh water on the planet is still in Africa. The youth population in Africa is still one of our strongest strengths and attributes. So when you put all of these together, we should not be
where we are.
A great nation. But the travesty of the situation and the irony is this. Put it this way. I graduated from the Faculty of Agriculture 1984. I don't know where you are then, but
I wasn't conceived. They didn't even think of conceiving.
That was when I left the Faculty of Agriculture. And at that time, I'm like, let's conquer the world. Let's feed the world. That was when Quincy Jones, now late, and all these big Americans in 1983 sang We Are the World in aid of the poverty and hunger in Ethiopia. So, armed with a very robust degree in agriculture, my whole thinking was that we will defeat hunger.
It's 43 years ago.
Right? So, after 40 years, I never missed a job for one day. in these 40 years.
Wow.
Africa is more hungry
Hungrier.
than when I graduated 40 years ago. Africa is more hungry.
Hungrier.
So can you see where
Yeah.
we are heading? And if this is one generation, and now I am edging out, if this story is repeated by somebody who's graduating from Kumasi or from Legon in agriculture, and 40 years later he says Ghana is more hungry 40 years later than we were in 2025, you know that 40 years later, then you must be eating grass in Ghana. Then there's really nothing to eat.
Yeah.
So if you don't take care of the future will come back biting you mercilessly.
Yeah.
And that's why today, you eat Indomie, don't you?
No, I don't.
Oh, good. You are the exception. But many of you guys, Gen Zs, eat Indomie.
Yes.
Indomie was brought by Chinese to replace our fufu, to replace our cocoyam, So today, undergraduates, it's easy, it's convenient.
Yeah,
just
it's
toss
just
it in hot water, stir it, throw an egg, and you are good to go.
Yeah.
So the rate at which we are having forgotten foods, underutilized foods, it is alarming. It is alarming. There were foods that I ate in my native country.
Yeah.
We don't have the recipes anymore.
You don't say.
No, cooked by my grandmother. My grandmother is now resting in dust. No recipes. Some of them I don't even know what they are called.
They're called.
They are things we grew up with, not hamburgers, not Pizza Huts.
No cheeseburgers.
You know? So what are we talking about? It's not just about putting garbage in our mouth. You know, we've got to really have a futuristic goal. Why is it that issues of obesity, malnutrition, and all of those are becoming a cause for concern? But who's thinking about it? I mean, when it becomes a pandemic, we say, huh? How did it arrive? Yes, it came one at a time, and you welcome them.
You know, it reminds me of this. I don't know who gave this illustration, but it talks about, you know, that the frog in the pan where
yes, and the water was eating up gradually.
Yeah, so it's like that. It came in gradually, and one day we realized that we are dead. But how did we come to this stage? What are the statistics?
Okay, let me say this. You know, when I got into the Faculty of Agriculture, that was 1979.
Yeah.
We were 150 that matriculated. When we graduated, there were 120 of us in 1984, 5 years. Okay? So, from 1984 till 2025, you are looking at almost 40?
Yeah.
No. Yeah, that's 40, 41, 42 years. Yeah. When I take a cursory look, out of the 120, we are not more than 6 who has anything to do with agriculture. Everyone, apart from those who God rest their soul, have departed this world. You find them, I have a lot of them in Canada. What do you do now? I'm with the bank. What do you do now? I'm an insurance executive. What do you do now? I'm even in security. You find we are in everything, and of course, many of them are pastors. So you find that's the narrative.
Yeah.
Now, in that context, where we produce and generate more churches, as if the table is fed by prayers, by praying in tongues. We have more churches than factories. We have lost the workforce. And in the context of that, our yield gap is continuously enlarging. So, unless somebody wakes up and who has a futuristic view to say that we are toying with a time bomb.
Yeah.
Now we have very good guys like the current president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akin, who, when he became president some 8 years ago, came up with this idea of Feed Africa and the 5 high fives. Because he himself is an agricultural economist. He could foretell and foresee the future, that if nothing is done, despite all the potentials, and really, you don't eat potentials, you eat food. So we will always remain hungry until we roll up our sleeves and have a coherent approach to defeat hunger, even though, we have everything to defeat it. If we don't do it, the default is hunger, malnutrition, and poverty. That's the default.
Oh, that's alarming.
Yeah.
That's really alarming. But now come to think of it, most of the youth, some years back, when you talk about agriculture, a lot of the youth were not interested in it. But now I think some people are making it quite attractive. But some of the people on the ground have come out to say that, it's not as easy as that. And it seems sometimes they don't understand what agriculture really is. So it's all about, going to the farm and at the end of the day, you are selling the produce. But, they don't know the processes that, everything goes through. So they come and they're like, I started it, but it's not for the weak.
Oh, no. Yeah. The terrain is definitely, it's not a walk in the park.
Yeah.
But you must make it attractive and you must make it conducive.
Okay.
I will not go into the field with hoes and cutlasses. No. And neither would my children do that.
Yeah.
But is that to say, why should any country still be having the handheld hoe in 2025? That's question one. Question number two, why is it that the government leadership to develop genetic resources and put them into good utilization of our genetic resources, nobody is looking at those things? Nobody. Now, take an example of two countries. Take an example of India, an example of Brazil. They are both countries in the BRICS. They are both countries in third world, if you like.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, India has produced a woman astronaut by name Sunita Williams, who is producing bacteria that will help in garden watering in space. It's the one woman that has spent the longest 602 days in space station doing biological research that can help agriculture. What are we doing in Africa?
Exactly my question to you. What are we doing?
Okay, by the grace of God, I was head of the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa.
Tell us about your experience
for
there.
10 years.
Yeah.
The African Union chairperson only met me one day in a continent where agriculture is the mainstay of the economy. The president at that time was Dr. Zuma, and it was thankfully that I was in the company of President Kufuor. He was then one of the emeritus board members of FARA. He had accepted to be our high, how do we call them? Some form of champion.
Okay.
And he went with me to Washington. He went with me to Addis Ababa. And Dr. Jean-Ping went with me to Brussels. Do we need to move Kufuor to tell African Union that agriculture is important? Do we need to do that? Is it rocket science?
No, it isn't.
In 10 years of heading FARA, I never got one dime from African Union to support, even though you read about CADEP.
Yeah.
CADEP started 2003 in Maputo. Now, in Maputo since 2003, that's 23 years ago.
Yeah.
What has happened? CADEP in itself is a good initiative.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be the first concerted blueprint that will keep Africa out of the doldrums. But CADEP today has only generated papers.
That's quite unfortunate.
Policy papers, seminars.
So why do we have so many, or should I say so much good? We have a lot of good policies. I attended a workshop quite recently, and we're talking about, why the government should do this, the government should do that. And one man from the EPA said, look, we have all the good policies that, address climate change, address productivity here and there, but it's with the implementation. Why are there so many institutions? We start so many things, but they end up as white elephants.
Well, it's a function of the type of leadership we have. Before we came on set, I told you the example of Cuba.
Yeah.
Cuba, with all the sanctions and all the bottlenecks it has, Cuba, when I first went to Havana, I realized that they were producing tomatoes at 120 metric tons per hectare, when Africa was under 15. And in 4 years, they have risen from 100 metric tons to 120 metric tons using hydroponics. Now, I'll shock you further. In Italy, France, and Netherlands, I went to my alma mater, to Wageningen once, and the rector there said, Yemi, would you like to visit the facility in Bleiswerk? I said, yeah, by all means. I went there. They are now at 800 metric tons per hectare. And
per hectare?
Per hectare. And on the field, that's 600 metric tons at the farmer's place. We are still 15.
You mentioned 15. 1-5.
Not 50.
Not 50. 1-5.
So this gives you an understanding of when we talk about the yield gap. But you see, I was in Arusha several years ago. I told the farmer, I said, look, your colleagues in Havana, they are already at 100. You are still between 10 and 12 and 15. He looked at me and said, Daktari, I can produce 35. I even did 40. But within 2 weeks, I had 40 tons of garbage.
Oh.
Yeah, because when tomato ripens, it ripens. Now, if it ripens and you don't have a market,
it's
what do you do?
Gonna rot away.
You beg people, take it, I will pay you. Not take
That's
it,
a
pay
loss,
me.
yeah.
So we need to rework the whole spectrum.
Yeah.
From farm to fork. Look, when you go to KFC in Osu or in airport or wherever, the chicken you buy there, that chicken was bought and sold before the egg was hatched.
Yeah.
Think about it. That chicken was bought and sold before the egg was hatched. That's what is called futures. That's why the farmers who produced so basically what it means is that they've signed the contract of sale with a poultry producer, because the chicken you eat at KFC is only maximum 7 weeks of life. So they didn't sign the contract 7 weeks ago.
Yeah.
They signed the contract a year ago or more to say, give me 25 tons of chicken meat every week. So before the chicken was hatched,
it's already
been bought and sold. But that's what technology does.
Yeah.
But look what happens. You grow your tomatoes. You now go and wait on the roadside waiting for the buyer. So when you sit there at 7 a.m., you want to sell it at 100 cedis. When the sun hits you at 12, you say, okay, Charlie, buy it at 80. By 4 p.m., your tomatoes is looking at you, it's already wilted. Then you say, okay, take it for 40 cedis. If you don't sell it at 40 cedis, the homestead will be hungry, your tomato will rot.
Or you eat it yourself.
Double whammy. How many tomatoes can you eat? So you see how things go in agriculture. There is still no system. Nothing says that when you want to sell tomato in Ghana, you sell to a cooperative.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist. Look, in the Netherlands today, every single farmer that owns a cow that is milking, he doesn't worry. Before the milk is extracted, it was already sold.
Yeah.
So
The demand is already there. Yeah.
So the incentives are there. So when you tell a Gen Z to go to the farm, with what? With what assurance that he will make money? With what?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bleak scenario. It's a bleak scenario. But there are examples, good examples. You go to Rwanda, you go to Kenya, you go to South Africa. There is a lady called Nono. It's a good girl that I have followed. It appears like her. They set up farms, and she put her a drone, and the drone is flying over. She sits in her office, and she can see what the workers are doing.
Yeah.
That is, putting technology into use.
Yeah.
But that's not the only thing. How much cassava is used in your banku in Ghana? How much plantain?
Now, in the fufu.
How much research? CSIR, by the way, is doing a good job. I am privy to some of the great work they are doing in the Kumasi facility, and even what the Steppery is doing. I have quite a few contacts there. Okay. I mean, it's still, the Ghana is still a good example of translational research, responding to the contemporary needs and demands. Look at the CRIG, the Cocoa Research Institute of Ghana. So those are still, they can do with much more support, but we are not there yet, but they are on the path.
On the path.
But most of the African countries, there's no money for research. How? There's no money for research. Listen, when you enter any laboratory in Ghana or Nigeria, any laboratory, when you look from A to Z in the laboratory, you cannot find more than one thing that is made in Ghana or in Nigeria, and that thing is pure water. This that's the only thing that you can find that is made in Ghana. So every other thing, even the needle that is the finest, or the syringe, is imported, is based on US dollars. Now, how do you generate? You cannot do science without forex.
Yeah.
In an economy that is struggling. Look, when I was in office, I drive around cantonments. I live in cantonments. You see, how many signboards of USA do you see around town? How many? And I'm always like, why? USA on this one, on capacity building, on this, on that. USA is everywhere.
And now they've pulled back there.
Okay.
So if you ask yourself, what
I didn't say
all
you are a Ghanaian. Me, I'm on my. I didn't say so. But you see, basically, just saying that our dependence. You see, the late Kanayon Wanze, God rest his soul, the former president of the International Fund for Agricultural Development in Rome, he said, "We have outsourced African agriculture for too long. African agriculture has been outsourced
for far too long.
For far too long, and that's where we are today."
So now we've realized, or we've identified, lack of research, lack of implementation. So, Doc, then you saw some of the challenges. Okay, you saw some of the challenges in FARA and CADEP. How did you address? What are some of these challenges, and what are some of the steps you helped to tackle these challenges that you faced when you were in power?
A persistent problem I had was bridging my budgets, having a balanced budget every year, and my board was forever on my neck. Now, what can you do if you don't have resources?
Yeah.
I cut staff, I did this, I shed that. Then you cut until you reach the bone.
Yeah.
So resources to do research. Listen, when you go to Egypt,
Yeah.
Egypt has what is called the ARC, Agricultural Research Council. Sudan has an ARC, Agricultural Research Council. Nigeria has ARCN, Agricultural Research Council of Nigeria. The fourth one is in South Africa, ARC. When you look at these four ARCs, in Egypt, they have more than 2,500 PhD research scientists.
More than 2,500 PhD research scientists.
And that means that they pay them a minimum of $1,000 every month. Minimum. Yes, because I have friends. I don't want to say 2,000.
Yeah.
Okay, so multiply 1,000 by 2,500 in a month. That's $2.5 million.
Yeah.
And multiply that in a year, that's $30 million just on salaries.
For these 25,
for salaries.
2,500 research.
Now, if you go to South Africa spends about 100 billion rands on research per annum. You can Google it. So, the issue is this. When you go to Nigeria, it's a different scenario. People will tell you, we have not received salary in the last 2 months. You go to Sudan, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that CADE pushed for is the investment of 10% of the national expenditure in agriculture. This is never done. So, if you sow peanuts, you must reap peanuts.
Yeah.
There's no rocket science there. So this was a challenge I faced. Resources. In 10 years of FARA, my salary was paid by Europeans. By European Union. Taxpayers in Europe paid my salary. Africans are. As if the research we are doing in Africa is for Europeans.
Yeah.
Europeans paid my salary, paid my house rent, paid my car. That's as bad as it gets. And I now went to the chair of African Union at the time, and she was oblivious of. She lost it. She has no clue. In a continent where agriculture is the mainstay of the economy. So that's why people are they cannot absorb technologies.
Yeah.
Because the bridge between the shelves in the labs and the farmer's homestead, it's not there. Okay, the other thing I did, what I think I could do, was to bring in the capacity, build the capacity of our upcoming scientists. Because right now, to start with, the age of the farmer is average age is between 65 and 70. Now, for the scientists, the researchers, the good ones are also aging and retiring.
Yeah.
So if we don't have a renewal plan, a renewal strategy, we will go into what we call inbreeding. You'll be producing mediocres. They will carry the title, but the head is empty.
Totally empty.
Yeah, because you just produce people who can cram and pour in exam. Cram and pour. Cram and pour.
Chew and pour. In Ghana, we call it chew and pour.
So in Nigeria, we call it cram and pour. So I now did something. I went to Nigeria to say, look, you guys have this fund that is charged, and you have it here, the Ghana Education Fund.
GS.
I actually...
Get Fund.
Yes, Get Fund. I spoke to some people in Get Fund, gave the Nigerian example, and actually got Ambassador Busia in Brazil, a good friend of mine. We discussed several times she actually facilitated the Get Fund meeting here. Okay?
Nice.
So I managed to get 120 Nigerians to go to Brazil to learn by assimilation how did Brazil get out of poverty? Brazil 50 years ago was a net importer. Brazil of today is a net exporter. How did they manage the transition? So I sent Nigerians, lecturers, young lecturers, go there, build bridges, learn and take on new ethos. Don't stay in your faculty, BSc Ibadan, MSc Ibadan, PhD Ibadan, retire in Ibadan. Don't do that. Go and get some cross-fertilization of ideas and bring them back home. And then have partnerships with universities that can help you up. So I got the money from Nigeria. We put 120. They came back with brilliant ideas. Nigeria was so excited, they put another 500 in the pipeline. Because that's a way to do it. I brought that idea here to Ghana. It's dead. Ambassador Busia was there when we launched this initiative in Bahia, in Salvador, in Brazil. She was one of those who lit the candle with me when we started it. And she facilitated how to get GetFund on board. But, I mean, GetFund is doing a good job. They sponsored one of my staff for a master's in Birmingham. But, yeah, we just need to do things. You see, when they say, adopt a theory of change. If your theory of change is not working, you have to do the change of theory.
Yeah.
You have to do the change of theory. So, you can't just be adamant and be obstinate and say this is the way it was done by my grandfathers. So if you did what they did, you'll get what they got. That's what has kept Africa where we are today.
But Doc, it's just so amazing how we are still at the same place.
We're not at the same place. We've gone
backwards. Okay. We've gone backwards.
Yes.
So what's the way for... We've said... I mean, I attend forums here and there, workshop training, and it's... I don't know. It's all talk, but... Enough of the talk. Why don't we start doing...
Years ago, when I was inaugurated at the Accra International Conference Center, one of the things I said when I gave my statement was... Enough of the blah blah. Let us start the do-do.
The do-do.
We're still blah blahing 12 years after. So enough. In fact, I told people when they invite me, I don't want to sit in panel discussions anymore.
Yeah.
It's useless. You talk, they clap for you, and they take some wache and jollof afterwards.
And then pictures, and then they... Yeah.
That's all we produce.
So what have you for the youth out there, the new minds out there? What should they do, especially for those in agriculture from the get-go? What can we do differently?
Well, there is nothing you can do. You can't do it in vacuum.
Yeah.
What that means is that you cannot isolate yourself from the wider system.
Yeah.
There is a systemic failure for these youth in agriculture. Look, you go to Stanbic Bank or you go to Zenith or Access Bank in Ghana and tell them I have a proposal as an agriculture to do some agriculture project. So if you come with such a project and asking them for finance, or even go to the Agricultural Development Bank, the ADB, and I write a proposal that I want to build an IT software, whatever, I will get that money before you do.
Yeah.
Because yours, when they do the risk analysis and the mitigation strategies, the bankers will be like, Charlie, come tomorrow. Come tomorrow. Because the one who is in, or you say, okay, no. You see how many developments, how many concrete? Cantonment is becoming like a concrete jungle.
Yeah.
Who's behind it? Banks. And I can tell you, for every one of those concrete jungle, there are 10 agriculture projects that the bank turned away. Is that how we're going to feed Africa?
Absolutely not.
You see, we have a proverb in my country: when you pull the rope pulls the goat. Yeah. actions have consequences.
Yeah.
So without really addressing the basics that will facilitate agricultural growth. I was looking at a book in my store just 2 days ago. That book was published by IFPRI, International Food Policy Research Institute. The title of the book is The Unfinished Agenda. It's all about food.
Mm-hmm.
But this book was written in 1984 or 85. Yet the agenda is still unfinished.
Still unfinished.
I was in a meeting in Rwanda last year, a FARA meeting. And when there was a special session and there was a panel. And when the panelists were speaking, and one of the things they say is that we would like to have some resources to be able to develop bankable projects. We want to train people to write bankable projects. And I raised up my hand. I said, please stop there. So one of the first things I had when I graduated was the concept of capacity building and technology transfer. They were very new to us in 1984. And we're like, yeah, these are the buzzwords: capacity building,
yeah,
technology transfer, agricultural transformation. I'm 40 years down the line. It's me who was transformed now into a resilient, adapting to hunger. You know? So the transformation was a mirage. They don't happen by default. You've got to put strategies to mitigate that. You had Operation Feed the Nation in this country. We had it also in Nigeria. Where did it go? Where?
So
Do the agricultural lands around Jowulu, are they not becoming concrete jungles?
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
We're gradually losing the greenery.
Okay. So, I mean, you cannot beat a child and forbid the child from crying. It's either or the other. If you convert your fields, I say this several times, you say the children that are fomenting Boko Haram and terrorism, I said, in a scenario where the farmers are aging, you put them behind AK-47 instead of behind tractors. You put your youth behind AK-47 instead of putting them behind a tractor.
And Galamsey pits.
I mean, does that not spell doom and disaster for the future? If I told you that we are more hungry than when I graduated, 40 years from now, if that statement is repeated, we are done.
Totally done. Now, Doc, another thing, before we wrap up, another thing someone may be talking about is there's another crisis coming. I don't know, you have been in agriculture for a long time. The issue of climate change. Can you talk a little bit about that? Does it have an effect on us, or we have a way, if we get serious with this whole thing, will we be able to come out of this climate change and its impact on food security in Africa?
It is for sure that climate affects everything.
Yeah.
So there are two ways of dealing with climate change. You either adapt or you mitigate. But for us in Africa, God rest the soul of Melese Zenawi, a great advocate and a great leader. I followed him to the negotiations in Copenhagen, in Cancun, and in Paris, and the last one before he died in Johannesburg, of the IPPC, the UNFCCC events, where this man pushed and pushed and pushed for Africa. But since he died, it's been a different narrative. But to say the truth, you cannot detangle agriculture from climate. So to be able to put mitigating strategies or adaptive strategies, now we talk about heat-tolerant wheat, we talk about water, what is it? It's a kind of maize that can deal with shortages of water and all of that. So this is the work of science.
Science again, research.
Yeah, but the sad part is that we are the most science deficient continent in the world, and we are the ones who needed it the most. So it's a double whammy for us. What you need the most is what you lack the most. How? So, when you talk about the top end research in agriculture, the CRISPR, they've even gone into something higher than the CRISPR. I was reading about it 2 days ago in India. They are doing gene editing, they are doing all sorts of things. Is it in a country where there is doomsday that you're going to put a machine that will help you to do gene editing? Or where you turn on the tap and the tap is dry? You cannot do even common distillation of water? I went to some facilities in Cairo the other day. One equipment, just one, like is $400,000. Just one. And you're looking at, having more than 100 of those. How? Where is the money coming from? Yeah. People are now engaging in what is called, Caroline, it's called nanotechnology. Technology, yeah. How many sub-Saharan countries can get in? We have not even done the one that you can see. You are talking about nano.
Wow. Interesting discussion here with Doc on the Feed Africa podcast. Now, Doc, so we've talked about what we need to do, but let's look at our governments. How can we bring our government to book? How can we make them accountable? How can we bring their minds to, doing the right thing? Because it's just looming. If we've gone back from and Ghana had a hunger crisis in 83. Mm-hmm. And if something like that should repeat itself, it's spelling doom. What is our government not doing, and what do we do?
Okay,
it seems it's just doom.
That's the beginning of doom. So now I will be generic rather than specific.
Okay,
so I don't get into trouble. But I will make one or two examples.
Okay,
you see that now that there is a regime change in Burkina Faso.
Yeah.
Burkina Faso is not going to import wheat again.
Yeah.
That's because of the leadership.
Yeah.
But if the leadership, you go to a country and the Minister of Agriculture is a banker, simply because he holds the party card. Simply because he delivered his constituency. So he becomes the Minister of Agriculture. What do you expect? So we've got to get our acts right. The priorities of the politicians has to be reworked.
Yeah.
Has to be reworked. What makes there is a country? The ministers are true ministers, servants. But in many African countries, when you are a minister, you are to be served.
Yeah. This is the other way around.
But there is one country. Actually, I can name it because it's a credit. It's Rwanda.
Yeah.
The ministers...
Everyone is talking about Rwanda.
Yes. The ministers in Rwanda, they are real servants of the people.
Mm.
And that's why Rwanda is what it is. Rwanda is what it is today.
Doc, is there hope for the other countries?
I'm not a prophet. But they know it and they see it.
Mm.
But you see, Africa, when you ask them, say, what is the color of this? They say, actually, when you start growing cotton, I say, what is the color? They go filibustering around. When they do know what is to be done. And it's never done, what can you do? The Bible puts it simple. If the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do?
Can we build a new foundation?
We don't have land yet. So, I mean, in my 10 years at the helm of affairs of FARA, my worst fear is the fact that I do not have the support of African governments. And yet, this is an infrastructure that is dedicated to servicing the people you claim to serve. Why should the resources be paid from Europe, from US, from Germany? Why?
Well, there's a lot here. Wow. Well, I don't know what to say again. It's worse than I thought it actually was. It's really worse. So, Doc, we know the way forward. We know what to do. How can how can the African youth listening,
Africa who?
youth listening, make a change? If from the top you're not getting the support that you need, you tried your best when you were in FARA, when you were in Kadip. How can he or she make strides little by little in our own small way?
Yeah. Okay. You see, everything happens, they start and ends on policies.
Yeah.
So policies can be good or bad.
No bad. Yeah.
But a bad policy is even better than no policy.
At all.
Because if you have a bad policy, you can tweak it.
Yeah.
But we are not short of policies.
Not at all.
And sometimes when I look at the youth, there is a woman, her name is Nana. She heads Guza. She's going to be angry with me that I forgot her name. So, Nana is, she leads a women-focused organization on agribusiness. And she's doing a great job. You know, I knew her from the time when I came to Ghana. She was at my inauguration, and that's when I met her.
How long ago?
2013.
Oh, that's yeah.
But she has grown this organization huge, and they're making very huge impacts. So, institutionalization of these kind of engagement strategies can help, so you don't feel alone.
Yeah.
That's one. The other is that even with Nana struggling, she gets a lot of her monies actually from outside Africa. And there is Sheung, a girl who organizes what is called Welcome to Africa.
Okay.
She is Nigeria-based, Sheung Owola. You have those individuals who are making some sparks here and there. But what is the Ministry of Women Affairs doing? What is the youth empowerment policy doing? Many a times they pay lip service. I mean, borrow a leaf from Brazil, from Cuba, from India, from Thailand, in the context of the G77, in the context of whatever socio-political leanings you want to take. The best bets, the good practices, we are not short of them. But you must be ready to pay the price. I mean, the ones I sent to Brazil were all young folks. I mean, so we've got to be intentional on how to empower the youth. If you don't empower the youth, you have condemned yourself to a miserable future. Yeah. Because your youth is your future. So if they are not empowered, look, when we had General Yakubu Gowon leading Nigeria, he was 29 years old. What are 29-year-olds of today doing? They're in Labadi Beach.
Yeah, betting, they're
smoking weed. And I mean, can you put them in charge of what do we call the smallest unit? La Dade
Kutupon.
Is it
Landmark.
Yeah, what do you call them?
Yeah.
The assemblies. Those
assemblies, yeah.
You can't put them there because, all they know is yo.
And following trends on TikTok. But there are serious ones out there.
Serious ones are there. But looking back,
the majority.
We had a 29-year-old prosecuting a civil war and winning it. Where was that wisdom from? But there has been a strange etymological, there's been a strange shift in our society that even those who grew in the politics wouldn't let the ones coming behind enter.
Yeah.
So the succession plans and strategy is zero. There was a country who set up something called not too young to rule. But we are not there because the youth are not properly educated and empowered for succession. Because if they do, it's going to be disaster.
It's going to be a different story. Yeah. Wow. Insightful discussion here. I think there's still hope. Yes, there's still hope. In the midst of the trouble, in the midst of the backwardness, 40 years on, this is the Feeding Africa podcast, and we have had a very wonderful time with Dr. Yemi Akinbamijo. Dr. Yemi, we are concluding. What are your final words to those watching us, to all Africa, to the African youth out there, to the farmer who came across the podcast? I mean, what is your final word?
Right. My final word, let's make Africa livable. If you put 100 young folks together today, if you ask them, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? You hear Canada, America, UK, France. It's like, do you know the book Pied Piper of Hamelin?
Sounds familiar, but I haven't read.
He played his flute and took all the children because they couldn't pay him. And took all the children in the village. Somebody is playing the flute and our children are dancing and following. So we are really, what I need to say, we must concentrate, retool, rethink, and refocus our energies to have a future that will not come back to bite us. Otherwise, we will not have Africa. And mark you, there are many interests looking at our minerals, looking at our petroleum, looking at our youth, looking at our agriculture, while we do nothing.
Well, it is well. There is still hope. Thank you so much for joining us on this edition of Feeding Africa podcast with me, Kari Asamoah. Well, our guest for today was Dr. Yemi Akinbamijo. We have interesting personalities and more discussions that is going to help us to feed Africa and change our future for the better. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.